Hello. Welcome to the last session, the last day of the conference. Thank you all for coming. We thought we'd probably take a more conversational, relaxed approach to this last session. I agreed to kick it off. So I'm Michael Dobe, and I work with AWS. I'm in the ProServe group, and I'm an advisory consultant. I had the pleasure of meeting these two gentlemen to my left about a year ago, and we've been working together to help the institution, Cal Poly, move 100% into AWS over a three-year period. And to my left, we have Ryan and Darren. I'll let them introduce themselves. I was the AWS lead on the project for the last year, and these two gentlemen led up the Cal Poly side. So,
great. Thank you, Michael. My name is Ryan Matteson. I'm the Deputy CIO at Cal Poly State University. I've had a number of technical roles in the past. I've done some computer security work, forensic analysis, but my role at Cal Poly now is really to think a year out, trying to make room for our future. And so our migration to AWS has been a fantastic project for doing this. It's given us back some capacity to think about the future again and how we can grow and do more for our customers. So just a quick preview of a little bit of what we're going to be talking about. We're going to focus on building knowledge and enthusiasm among the staff. We see the staff as our most valuable resource in this migration effort and getting all the value in the future from AWS. I'm excited to be here and share a little bit with you about what we've done and what's worked for us.
And my name's Darren Kraker, and I've had a variety of roles at Cal Poly as well. I used to be the manager of the application development team, where we had our foray into AWS. We did a little bit of getting our CMS system, Drupal, into that. And more recently, I serve in a role that's as a technology strategist, where I get to work with faculty that are having frustrations with technology on campus, and where we get to use AWS to kind of help them solve problems.
So if you wanted to contact any of us, either now or later, there's our contact info. I'm Michael, Ryan, and Darren. I thought we should probably start by talking a little bit about the institution, about Cal Poly. I had the pleasure of spending some time there. It's a beautiful location, amazing institution, and maybe, Ryan, you could tell us about it a little bit.
Sure, yeah, you can see this is Cal Poly. It's a great place. Learn by doing, as you can see, is our motto. We're a public university in California, about 20,000 students, primarily undergraduate and graduate focused. And we really do focus on teaching and learning, and research is part of the teaching and learning process. Small class sizes, hands-on, practical degrees. If you come visit our campus, and welcome you all to come and visit, Learn by doing, you'll see it. You'll walk around campus, you walk past a classroom or a lab, and you'll see what Learn by doing means. And what it is, it's immersive education. It's project-based, it's teams of students working together, not only kind of experiencing the work, but actually being immersed in challenges, how it feels to work with people from other disciplines, how it feels to struggle to make good decisions with incomplete information, and ultimately to deliver something to a customer, to make the world a better place. So Learn by doing is deep in the core of Cal Poly.
Well, Cal Poly started at one place and made some significant progress. This is kind of going back in time a little bit, or is it?
Yeah, this is our data center. This is our infrastructure. This data center was built in 1963, and it was cutting edge in 1963. The hardware, the stuff in the room has changed somewhat, but the room itself is fairly similar. And so one of our initial kind of motivations to think about a better future was this room. This does not keep up with Learn by doing. Learn by doing means we have undergraduates that are building satellites that are actually on launch vehicles and then go into space. They're in space right now. We have students going out on boats in the Pacific Ocean collecting data. We have students flying drones over agricultural fields to collect data. All these things, data, right? Better tools. This is not the kind of resource that keeps up with that kind of flexible, innovative learning process. And so this is something we need to move beyond.
Absolutely. And I think there's sort of a parallel question we want to focus on today, which is the people. Is a shot from the 1960s.
Yeah. It's not only the data center and the computers that have changed since then, the people, the styles have changed a little bit since then as well. But the way that people work together has changed quite a bit. The expectations on how we work has changed quite a bit. And so the data center is a visible manifestation of some of the challenges that we've had in being flexible, meeting our customer needs. But really, a bigger part than that is probably even how we work. And so we've been working to adopt DevOps practices, Agile, Lean, many other great sessions at the conference this week about this. And so we see these as one and the same. Our technology move is really a big part tied together with moving the way that we work, enabling our people to work better.
One of the first people that I met and saw talking about AWS in Cal Poly was the president. You had a keynote speech from Cal Poly last summit. And, I was very impressed by the fact that the president and the CIO were both extremely engaged and lent very strong executive support. Perhaps you could talk about how that fit into the overall approach.
Yeah, project of this size and type, rule number one is get executive sponsorship. And I don't know how we could have better executive sponsorship than the campus president on stage at Summit announcing this partnership. So really, this partnership has 3 parts. I'm excited about all of them. I'll briefly list them, but we're mostly going to be talking today, this session, about our migration of campus services to AWS. So that's one component. The second piece, Paul Jurison, who's here, earlier this afternoon, he gave a presentation about our digital transformation hub. We call it the Cal Poly DX Hub, powered by AWS. It's a customer innovation center. So go after the conference, check out the video, learn a little bit about that. And that's about bringing together public sector clients that have challenges, and then we bring together the faculty, the students, the technologists from AWS and Cal Poly to help solve these challenges. And this is stuff that's making the world a better place. So that's the DX Hub. Second piece of this is the California Cybersecurity Institute. Not much crime happens today that doesn't have some sort of technology component. So that institute is helping educate law enforcement, teach them, as well as some operational capabilities, things like forensic analysis. So the big part we're going to talk about today is migrating a campus to AWS, and especially helping the people, the staff, grow during that migration. And so we have some great staff, but it's a bit of a struggle when your hands are tied with old tools.
Absolutely. Well, when we first met on campus, one of the things that struck me was that there was a lot of willingness amongst the staff to learn. So I had the privilege of going in front of an all-hands meeting when I first arrived and sharing the mutual vision that we developed together. Staff were there asking really good questions, very engaged. So we started off with some very strong advantages. We started off with the staff that had good leadership and that really understood why they were going. The purpose was very clearly stated and the mission was clear, but filling in the how, that was the part they needed to learn more about. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how we spread the message and got people immersed in AWS.
And as you're talking, I think, Sherry, I think you're in the audience, and I haven't met you, but I was in your session this morning. There was a session this morning about silos and moving organizations into this new world. Sherry and others spoke at that session, great session, and she talked about the ADKAR model for change. That was part of what we did as well. But a lot of this was explained to staff, why are we doing this? Staff saw some barriers we were encountering, but helping them understand and connect AWS, how is that going to solve that? And including it, tying it together with the organizational changes, the process changes, and the training and the tools we were going to give to the staff to help them use this technology. That was a big part of our project. And from the very beginning, we wanted to make sure we didn't fall into the trap of focusing on the technology. Somebody hands you a toolbox with 100 amazing new tools. There's sort of a instinctual desire to pick each one up and look at it and think, what can I do with this? We wanted to make sure we focused first on who's the customer, what are we trying to accomplish, who's going to be involved in accomplishing that.
Absolutely. And there were some things that you shared with us that were sort of top 10 things that worked.
Yeah. So the rest of the session, we're going to be talking about 10. We'll touch on each of these 10 things. We don't need to kind of go through them in detail now, but to give you a sense, it's all about building knowledge, building enthusiasm, and at Cal Poly, we're about learn by doing. So for our IT staff, we did this in a learn by doing way, and an immersive way of learning.
Keeping it fun.
keeping it fun. We'll get to that.
Yep.
That'll be about halfway through.
Well, for me, it was fun from the very beginning. It was a pleasure, I've said that, but I would reinforce that message, working with people who really rolled up their sleeves and became intimately involved with the project from the very beginning. This picture of the staff at work mapping the existing infrastructure and trying to understand and document the architecture in place, that from the very beginning, the staff wanted to be involved in it and they wanted to be part of it. It was a people project from the very beginning. We were very fortunate to have a very active HR and finance presence. You mentioned earlier how they'd come for a short session and stay for the whole time.
Yeah, so a lot of the mechanism we used was workshops. Get people together in a room, and sometimes these are people that are not used to working together. So for us, we knew it was critical to involve campus HR. It was critical to involve the budget team. So I called them up and I said, "Would you come join us for these workshops?" And I put it on their calendar, and it was a 6-hour calendar entry. I immediately, got a call back. "Which hour do you want us there for?" I'd like you there, all of it, please.
Yep.
But it's not too presumptuous. So they came for the start, and they stayed almost the entire time in some cases, because I think they saw this is not a technology project. This is a people project. This is a budget project. It's a way of doing things much better from that perspective. And so being able to find those common interests, not just within our technical organization, but within our campus, and showing them that value. And I got to say, we learned an awful lot, because as we were talking through issues, they got pretty comfortable talking with us as well, and pointing out things we should consider, benefits that we should be talking about, and so we learned through that process. It also helped smooth our path later in the project. We talked with our union as well, and some natural fear of, is this outsourcing? Are we going to be downsizing? The opposite. This is upskilling, this is training, this is educating, this is giving people an opportunity for professional advancement. And so having that conversation at the very beginning of our project was an important part of our success. Also, a quick comment on that slide. This part of why it's so important to start with people is they know the reality. This whiteboard, we did not have this diagram in our documentation system. Right. People knew why each of those lines on the spaghetti diagram was added, because they were there. Maybe they were the one that added that dependency. So you better start by knowing your reality, and that reality is in people's heads.
Well, I think what sort of prompted you to scroll back a minute was the neatness of this as opposed to the messiness of that, right?
Yeah.
So we took a journey together, and part of the results was we had some knowledge sharing that allowed the team to build new architectures, to build new approaches. Gentleman in this particular slide was one of the leaders, early leaders, and he was very effective, I think, at sharing his knowledge with others and building enthusiasm for AWS and learning. So,
yeah, sure. Initially, when President Armstrong stood on stage and announced we were all in, Ryan and I sort of, with reInvent coming up a few months later, thought we have to dig down and learn a little more about AWS. So with just a few months to go, we got some certification guides and did some weekend and nighttime cramming.
Very typical Cal Poly tradition, the cram session.
Cram session?
We did that.
And then somehow after all that, we passed the certification exam at reInvent and came back to campus, and we were pretty excited about it. Obviously, anytime you come back from reInvent, you're pretty excited about the technologies and all the new things they're doing. Yeah. So we started sharing with staff, and again, Michael referenced John Morton. He's just that kind of guy. He's curious, willing to learn on his own. He's like, "Oh man, because you guys got certified, I want to get certified too." And so, very quickly, then he turned around and got certified. And so we had our initial enthusiasm. Did you mention the cat yet?
Yeah, and so he was also following the cram session model, but that kind of scaled out as well. That was a seed that we grew from, and we'll talk a little bit later about how for each of these things, we were always looking, what's the next step we can take to kind of build on what's working, to kind of build on that success. Another critical part of this is forming a guiding team. We'll talk about that. And so as people would come to us and express interest, we looked for those people that had some curiosity. Find the curiosity that already exists out there. And it could present to you as skepticism. It could present as, I'm not sure about this. I heard you're doing this, and I think this might not be the right thing. use that, right? Use that as an invitation to have a conversation. And if you have some people, I imagine many of you in the audience are those people. You're the people that came to this conference, so you're the ones that will see that excitement, that enthusiasm. And if you educate yourself, you know enough from this conference, you can go back and give people examples. So a lot of what we did also was saying, hey, John, I know you have this challenge on the database side. Let me tell you about RDS. Let's talk about this a little bit. So start connecting some enthusiasm, some knowledge with challenges that people already feel.
Absolutely. John was very engaged, and he pushed back and gave an idea. So, this is how we present it. How does it work in reality? And really wanted to engage in a good dialogue. It's one of the things that I can't stress enough is having that open conversation and dialogue. There's no such thing as a stupid question. That's reality. People need to be encouraged to speak up and to challenge you. If you're in a leadership position, maybe especially if you're in a leadership position, the comfort the team has with having open dialogue is really critical, and that's about trust. And Cal Poly is a place built on trust. The ITS organization has very open communication, and that was a real key to the success here, I think, was that culture.
However, so Darren and I had some experience with AWS outside of Cal Poly, going back a number of years, and we had a couple other people did as well. And we've been through some very large migration projects in the past, upgrade projects. We'd never been through a massive AWS migration, and so we thought we could use some help. So through a competitive procurement process, we selected Annika as our implementation partner, and AWS Professional Services as well. Sort of the hands-on keyboards, technology, as well as the people and the cost of ownership side. So for us, it was important to have help to guide us. We heard about this thing called the Cloud Adoption Framework, the CAF, and we came to understand that's a really repeatable, mature process that would help guide us through our migration. At the same time, it's not a recipe we have to follow. It's a guide, and we appreciate there's a lot of flexibility in it to meet our culture. Every university thinks they're special. We're no different. We're special. But we do have a unique culture. We have some unique challenges. And so the CAF, the migration process really was tailored to the way that we wanted to do this process.
Absolutely. And I think bringing up the CAF at this point is really important. It's a framework, a cloud adoption framework that AWS has developed over many iterations and refined based upon experience with customers. And I just sort of point at a high level to the fact that it covers both the business perspective as well as the technical. And the partnership between AWS and Annika was critical to making that successful in supporting Cal Poly in the journey. I led the side of the CAF that dealt with people and process, what we're talking about today. And Annika did a wonderful job of leading the technical parts of the CAF. So things like landing zone and security model and the way that we approached the operating model. So we collaborated on that, and we worked with Cal Poly to fashion approaches that weren't templated, but were built based upon what Cal Poly needed and the specific circumstances of Cal Poly.
Yeah.
So,
and just to kind of reinforce, a big outcome we're looking for in this project is we want our staff to be able to support this environment and to continue to grow and innovate as AWS does with their services. And so I have a young child, and I remember when she would often say, "Dad, I want to do it myself." Do it myself. That is how we wanted to do this project, is some coaching, some mentoring, some guidance. But we want to come out of this being able to do it ourselves, to keep growing on our own.
Absolutely, and that's the common objective that AWS has with its customers. We love to work with people in an enabling fashion, especially ProServe, where we're able to help you learn how to fish, not fish for you, and we can wrap up the project with the knowledge that you've grown and you can run with it on your own. So that was a real nice partnership.
So we talked a bit about this cloud acceleration team. AWS has this concept of a center of excellence, a cloud center of excellence. Vocabulary is important. We didn't think that term would go well on our campus. Cloud acceleration team had more of the ring that we wanted. It's about bringing people together so we can move more quickly, helping them focus. And so some key things we mentioned, look for that enthusiasm, even if it comes across as skepticism initially, and pull those people in make sure you have the right people to cover the necessary knowledge. So security, you got to have security involved. Somebody with some budget knowledge has to be involved, some architects. Beyond that, look for the people that are enthusiastic, but don't stagnate. This team, every 3 months, we cycle new members in, and that's core to how this team functions. And part of that is bringing in new, fresh perspectives. Part of it is making sure we can teach people, we can explain, why did you do this? If we can't explain the why, we need to go back and think about it some more. And then part of it also is to get representation from around the organization, so there's some shared ownership. I can go talk to a group and tell them, great news, we figured this out for you. It's much better if their peer who sits next to them can tell them and show them their own enthusiasm for it.
And just to highlight what Brian said about changing the composition of the team, I'll step back for a second. That slide shows round 2 membership of the Cloud Acceleration team. The CAT, you'll see a couple folks at the front of the room that you recognize probably from the stage. And all the folks around the table, new perspectives, new voices, broader engagement, and diving even deeper into the technology stack. So it was a real nice way to increase and broaden the involvement and do it in a way that's incremental. Don't overwhelm everyone. We all come into this, we're enthusiastic, we want to share the good news, we want to get out there, but a little bit of measure in your step and just doing it in incremental fashion, I find leads to a lot more success in getting the message across clearly. So that was round 2 of the team, and you'll see Annika there in the back from the side of that table, and they were coming into their phase of actually a lot of hands-on keyboard and starting to help move that migration.
So I'll speak to this slide. So the sharing sessions were kind of our next, evolution. People started to get excited, all this talk about Amazon, and so these sharing sessions were a way for people to kind of go explore. We were focused obviously on this migration effort, but also wanted to look at other services. Amazon, offers many services. It gave us an excuse to kind of explore maybe outside that box, and then share back with our peers. This was an open invite to anybody in ITS. So it was open to anyone to give a sharing session or to attend. So those of us that started to dive into those technologies, and they were very informal. They weren't necessarily, some were 20 minutes long and some were an hour and a half. But those that were exploring and finding interesting things, they would share them back to the organization through these sharing sessions.
Yeah, it also sort of establishes this pattern of, I probably will get 5 updates during this hour about new AWS announcements on my watch, which is fun, but it can also be really alarming, right? How do I keep up? A classroom-based training can be a great foundation, but it's not going to keep you up with the pace of innovation in AWS. And so this is a mechanism we introduced to do that. It's a sustainable thing because we all own a piece of educating each other, and it also establishes the norm that none of us get to be experts.
Absolutely.
We are all continually learning. We're all continually responsible for helping others to learn as well.
One of the great things when I started with the project was you'd already been doing a lot of this, and I was able to go in and watch some of those sharing sessions. You'd recorded them, and I got up to speed on what you've been doing by watching those. Really amazing sessions. I mean, worthy of a reinvent.
Yeah, I think we have
that's a good
maybe
point.
40 recorded sessions now.
Yeah, we did also record them all, so staff that couldn't be there because the sessions were always on a Friday, they could go back and watch them later. So
It was great, very effective.
So then sort of, again, an extension of this shared learning model, a lot of the CAT team members expressed interest, those that weren't already certified, to get certified as well. So, and again, in that same spirit, those of us that had been certified, we would, Friday morning, we'd grab coffee and kind of share our experiences and go in through some of the chapters in the book and just ask each other questions and, both grow our knowledge with those that were sort of new to the AWS and those that had some more experience. And so those sharings, or those book club sessions were really effective. The first round, I think we had a 100% pass rate, which is probably higher than the
Nobody will tell us the actual pass rate average, but we understand that that's good.
Yeah.
100% is good.
Yeah, so
It's excellent.
We were relieved and happy, and so were the people.
And as the slide mentions, there's another, so I did the first, book club, led most of them, and then after that round of people passed, there's actually another set of book club meetings that are led by the people that just were certified. So.
Yeah, so this whole aspect of
about
pay
10
it
more,
forward,
yeah.
and as soon as you learn it, start teaching it to somebody else.
Absolutely.
Because that's how you get the scale. That's how you get this really rapid growth of knowledge across the whole organization.
Yep. And we had talked initially when I got there about some of the reading white papers and things they could look at, and we had talked about the Phoenix Project book, and that resonated with the team, but it had been in an earlier iteration of the book club, and that hadn't really taken off. It's this sort of learning by doing philosophy that this project brought to that learning, really made it take off like it did in the past. So that's for me, that was very impressive, that by doing this as part of the project, you really institutionalized a way of developing your staff's capabilities.
And now it pretty much runs itself.
Yeah.
Darren and I occasionally go back and visit one, and then we become the learners because a lot has changed in the last year, and so we'll answer a question confidently just to be told, actually, that's changed. It's better now. It's different.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
So, there you go. Keeping it fun.
Yeah. So, again, just this evolution, right? We had these sharing sessions. We had the book club. We wanted to sort of grow. These are primarily limited to just ITS, right? And so we really wanted to extend that model. And so, we decided to actually start up a meetup with an AWS users group in San Luis. And in this photo, we have Kevin from Monica. He was our guest speaker. They helped kind of help see this effort. And so we did a session on recognitions, and it's great because I actually like the user group stuff because it gives me an excuse to go learn a technology that I might not necessarily learn, that's part of our infrastructure or migration. So it really helps expand, my knowledge and gets me excited about different aspects. But this session, the reason we're both laughing is because we were trying to debug. Kevin had written a mobile app that would use recognition on the back end. You would take a photo, and as you show up to the meetup, it would recognize you and say, "Welcome, Darren." But in this case, when he took an actual picture of me, it reported null, but a picture of a picture reported my name. So
that bug has been completely fixed. But again, it makes it okay to fail.
Right.
There's this message here of, if you're going to be learning really quickly, you're going to be stumbling at times, and by modeling that for the staff, it sends a message, it's okay, it's good. It's good to fail, learn, move on. Also, while we didn't intend to be using recognition on our campus anytime early in the migration, we had some faculty come,
That's a great story.
and he walked back, you've spoken with him.
So we've got one, I'll talk about him later. We've got a professor who's in the IME department, Industrial Manufacturing, and he, I told him about this session, and he's like, "Oh, I want to go," and he doesn't really know anything about AWS, and so he shows up, and then the next day I get a phone call. He goes, "I was talking to another professor. We're doing mobile station research where they have these mobile radar stations that are taking pictures of the coastline, looking for, just keeping the coastline safe, making sure there's no illegal fishing." And what they noticed was right now interns are processing these photos. There's thousands of them. And he goes, "I have a great idea. Let's use recognition so the interns don't have to go through all the photos. We can figure out a way to just, identify boats or other things in the photos so we can just closely identify those." So already he got super excited, and it was great to see that adoption.
It made it more fun for the students too.
Yeah.
So beyond user groups, beyond the ability to share through these book groups and learning sessions, you really made it an immersive experience for people involved in the project. I love this photo. It sort of captures a lot of the excitement and the spirit. Maybe you could talk to the photo and what it means.
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier when we approach migration, we're going to migrate this app. That can be a stressful thing. For many people in the past, that's been, you have a deadline, you have to hit it no matter what. As you work through the project, you start to see that your resources are constrained. You're not going to really be able to do it the way that you consider right. So we thought, to start, let's take the pressure off. Our goal is to walk into a room. The only pressure is a very short time pressure. Walk into a room, 2 days later, see if you can have migrated an application. And some of these people are walking in fairly cold. They've had a little bit of online training, but this was very early in their experience with AWS. There's a lot of skepticism, rightly so. There were some people sitting in the corner of the room, kind of like this body language. This is not going to work. However, this is in the afternoon, just after a lunch break. We're only 2 or 3 hours into this workshop to migrate a very complex learning management system to AWS. And Juan is on the left of the photo there. He came in with some rightful skepticism, not a whole lot of AWS experience. After lunch, he walked in and he had a monitor under one arm and he had a keyboard under one arm and he had like his coffee and he was moving into this conference room. I said, Juan, what are you doing? And he's like, I get it now. I can be so much more productive with AWS. So I want to make sure I have all my tools so I can get the most out of this experience. And guess what? After 2 days, we had migrated the application. Now, would I send students to go use it? No, not yet. But it was more than 50% of the way there.
Yep.
And it set the tone. We can come back, we can get it to 70%, we can get it to 80%. And another great thing about this is these people, they're not looking at each other across the room. You know, they're not kind of having contention and argument. When there's argument, it's more like, hey, get out of the way, let me type, I want to do it. And also, people in the room that were maybe not as engaged to start, they start to hear questions that they know the answer to. Because they start to see my knowledge as a system administrator or an app developer, it is very applicable here. And they see we are all learning. It's okay to not be an expert. And I keep saying that because it's so important to take away the fear. Your best staff, they're used to being the experts on things. They're used to the respect that comes with that. Help them see the respect that comes with learning and with teaching your peers, because that's part of this new model. You earn respect by teaching and by capacity to learn and by capacity to try things and fail a little bit.
Absolutely. Best way to learn something is teach somebody else. And that spirit really is one of the driving factors here. The picture here shows the room that I think it was the room that I came to one of your all hands meetings in, and that's your CIO talking to the team. I think that there were some gaps identified and things that you wanted to go further with. Every time iterating, always filling in, finding more gaps, iterating, finding new solutions. Maybe you could talk to some of that dynamic.
Yeah, so again, with this learning model, and Teresa Carlson said it, a lot of people are, blocked by the human resource, right? These technologies are all fun, but there is a lot to learn. It's different. The way you operate an on-prem data center is different than you operate in the cloud. And so, we had this, started with this, cone of people that are really excited and, really wanted to get involved. But then, we have about 120 staff, and at this point, we had 30 or 40 people pretty well engaged. But then we started thinking, okay, we need other paths. We need to get other ways to get people engaged, and people learn in different styles as well. So we engaged with AWS training, professional training, where we had an on-site trainer come to campus, and we used the AWS learning paths. There's basically the SysOps. They're the ones that we kind of focused on. There are many. The SysOps, the solutions architect, and then the developer. And we realized those were sort of the core skills that we needed initially to really get started. And we kind of identified kind of minimums, like we really need so many SysOps, so many solutions architects. And so Ryan and I kind of had this debate about, well, maybe we should just pick people and put them in the class. And so the more we talked, we're like, let's just let people pick. Like, we had pretty good descriptions on our wiki page saying here's what you're going to learn in this class, here's some of the objectives. And in some cases that resulted in a conversation. Staff were like, I don't know which to pick, like, what do you think? And so it gave us an opportunity to say, look, here's how we see things evolving. Here's the kind of skills that fall into this sort of skill set. And in the end, the numbers just worked out. Like, we didn't really have to change the sizes or anything. People just kind of gravitated to what their competences were, what they thought they could contribute to, and that was a good model.
And we knew they couldn't make a bad choice.
Right.
They learned plenty in both classes, and it's a much better conversation to have. It could have been we would assign people and they would come and say, I think you put me in the wrong class. Right. That's the conversation I'd rather avoid. Much better to have something like, help me understand what the material is, help me understand how to make a good choice. And again, that sense that we each have more personal responsibility in AWS in terms of how we use resource, the decisions we make. And so this, from the very beginning, put people into that mode of realizing they have a lot of choice to make in this about where they want to go with the work that they do.
Yeah, and then we supplemented that with quick labs, so people could just kind of do some labs on their own in a particular area of interest, and I think quick labs had quests as well. And then we also used the AWS Organizations API to anyone that wanted an account, they would fill out a form, and then we would give them their own personal account because we have shared accounts with our own VPC structure and whatnot. But it enabled them they could do whatever they want. If they were a network engineer, they wanted to tear down the VPC and recreate it. There was no impact to the rest of the activity we were doing. So quite a few staff took advantage of that as well.
So, picture of a faculty member here. We've been talking a lot about getting the IT staff enthused, and that's central to our discussion today. I think we've shown a lot of ways in our discussion that you got your team to another level, that you brought people along, and that you addressed the skills gap with internal development. Rather than having to go out and recruit a whole new team, you're able to build on the enthusiasm you had internal to Cal Poly. You mentioned a couple of things earlier that mentioned faculty and how they got excited. Maybe you could talk about this gentleman in this picture.
This is my buddy Kurt. So this is the gentleman I mentioned earlier that came to the recognition session. So kind of in my role now, the migration effort's kind of well underway, is I get to work with faculty. I get to, Ryan and I are part of a committee on campus where people with research and learning that are interested in cloud computing, they sort of, attend this, and we send out surveys and ask, is there any technical limitations? Are there situations you're running into where you're frustrated or you're limited with the technology? And so what we've done is sort of engage, which, we've sort of cherry-picked a few that have come to the forefront and looked at, how they will be extendable and how we could use them later. But these great examples of how AWS can really help transform the way they do business. The first example was Laura Cacciamani. She's in the psychology department. She, just on her own, was using some open source software to analyze functional MRI data. She'd get these raw data files out of the MRI machine, and then she'd have to build three-dimensional...
Brain scans.
Yep,
yeah.
Brain scans. And then she'd have to build a three-dimensional model of the brain, from this raw file. And, she had a fairly modern Mac desktop, and she would sort of process each file. And processing times ranged between 12 to, some case, 90 hours. And because of the, the way she did it, it's her regular machine. It took her months to get through this. She sort of started and, go to class and come back. And so when she presented this issue to us, I said, oh man, we can do this way faster in Amazon. And so using AWS and Batch and Docker and a couple other, technologies, we were able to process all 30 of her subjects, which previously took 6 months. We did it in a weekend. And the total cost to do that in Amazon was like $286. And she was floored. She was like, are you kidding me? Like, I'll write the check myself. Like, that's great. And then Kurt, he was just interested in cloud technologies as well, and came to the committee meetings and was like, yeah, I really want to do teaching and learning with my students. I want, they're going to need to know data science. Data science, is emerging, and I don't want them to graduate from Cal Poly without having, exposure to that. So we met, and he talked, and he goes, I have some ideas. Maybe we could install Linux, and then we could install, a LAMP stack on there, and really get. And I said, Kurt, that's not how the cloud works. Like, it's all automated. Like, you just tell me what you need, and we'll get you that, and you focus on the research and the learning objectives that you want to get out of the class. And he was like, really? And so using CloudFormation, we spun up, for each student, we spun up an EC2 instance that they used for the quarter, fairly efficient and low cost. And when at the end of the quarter, we just terminate all the instances. And at one point, one of the students misconfigured something. I said, oh, it takes me a minute to get you a new one. He was like, really? And so he saw the power, and I just got a call yesterday. He's like, I want to do something again in the fall. So it's been a really successful model, and there's many more teachers out there with faculty that are excited to work with us. So.
Yeah, I just want to stress, like, the way you've asked that question to faculty is what's allowed these to happen, because we can give presentations about AWS and what it can do for us, and but when you turn that conversation around to what are you struggling with, is there something that's getting in your way? Once you have a little bit of AWS knowledge, you will see these examples all over your organizations. You'll be able to connect that in and start doing these proof of concepts to show the value. And then we don't need to go give as many talks to faculty. These faculty go give their talks over coffee, right, where the words really sink in.
Yep. That's building the enthusiasm beyond the staff, right? That's a great thing. Well, thought we'd end this on a question to you guys, final question on your advice for next steps and things that people in the audience might want to ask us questions about.
Yeah, well, I just sort of reiterate, Darren and I have been at Cal Poly a while and in the field quite a while, And so we began when mainframes still roamed the earth, but we were some of the first people building web front ends on top of mainframe applications. So we eventually helped retire the mainframe at Cal Poly. And that was a big deal. I still look back on that and think, fondly about all we accomplished. What we are doing right now feels like an even bigger deal because it's not just improving the way we work, it's completely changing the way that people are able to work. And it's seeing the results, like with the faculty, of solving these problems in a way that this will change the way that people are able to approach their research. It will change people's lives, and that feels fantastic. And so what made that possible is, I think, a common pattern. We dipped our toe in the water 5 years ago. And it was fine, it was great, water felt good, and we just never quite went further. And so there's this critical mass that we're able to achieve, and it helped to have fantastic executive sponsorship and the commitment, but a lot of what's worked well is having staff reinforcing each other, having the enthusiasm, the learning build. Once you have that, you can't hold it back, right? That becomes a very nice problem to have, to try and hold some of the enthusiasm together and focus it. Much better problem to have than sort of the 1960s data center and the stagnation and sort of the struggle that we had before.
Yep. So it's both a top-down and a bottom-up approach.
Yeah, you got to work all the angles you can. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both very much for your time and for coming to talk to your peers here. It's been a pleasure for me. We still have a few minutes left to ask some questions, so I'd like to wrap our portion up now and turn it over to the audience to ask questions. I can't see if anybody's raising their hand, so someone's got to help me here.
Oh, there's one over there. Yeah.
Ah.
So I'll repeat the question. The question is, faculty come to us and ask us to build something for them. And so we should probably stress, what we're working on right now are proof of concepts. In some cases, we're not sure what the final model will be. Often our initial conversation with a faculty customer is they say, just give me my own account so I can have control to do it myself. And that speaks to kind of the history of they don't want any barriers. They want some local control. And so what we're doing with these faculty is we're showing them we have some knowledge. We will explore this with you. We will do it within a 90-day period. We'll give you some time and resource to figure out what works. And at the end of that, we'll work together to write up the result. And we'll work with this committee, we'll work with our leadership and our IT organization on campus to say, we think we can build a service out of that. So it's data collection, it's research, it's experimentation that will then inform what are the services we will offer. So in some of these cases, like with Kurt and spinning up EC2 instances, we know we have many other academic departments who would like the exact same thing. We know it's something we're going to be very good at internally, is spinning up servers in an automated fashion. And so we'll be able to come up with a very predictable pricing structure, a very predictable model. And in the case of somebody like Kurt, he wants a packaged solution where he can give us a list of students and we do the rest. Right? Others may want something where they have a little bit more control. Computer science maybe wants to kind of control their server image a little bit more tightly. But through these proof of concepts, not only do we build excitement, but we also learn a lot about what is the service that we should be defining and figuring out the staffing and the cost to support. But we're sure we're building something people will use.
Right. And to build on what Ryan said, in these early phases, we really are hand selecting proof of concepts that we think are extendable. So like in both these cases, Ryan said, in Kurt's case, that's a repeatable pattern that, now that we know it's popular, we could take the automation that we built and turn that into a service catalog or something. Same with Laura. So her solution, even though it was very specialized with open source software, in the end, we just build a Docker container for that. The other technologies that we use, like batch and all that, that's all reusable. So we look for those kind of, we're picking those problems intentionally because we know we can extend those and scale.
Just to reinforce it, the software Laura runs, she's the only person on campus that uses that piece of software. So she thought she was alone. She thought nobody else does stuff like I do, so I just have to figure it out on my own. But we know running a command line program on a Unix server, lots of people do that. Right. So we could see that pattern and we could generalize it for her and then build a service to offer to many other customers. Oh, hello, at the microphone. Can we get the microphone turned on?
Maybe.
If you
Hello.
can,
Yeah, hi. I was wondering, how do you handle a situation when someone in your team is not as skilled or as passionate as you are? And also, how big are your teams?
so how do we handle a situation where somebody's not skilled?
Yeah, and is not as passionate as you are. And
Yeah. And then how big are the teams? So the teams one, I'll take quickly. If you've been to many sessions, you've probably heard about the 2 pizza rule. You want a team small enough that it can be fed with 2 pizzas because that makes sure they can communicate well and they can have kind of a shared understanding. They'll gel as a team. So our largest teams tend to be 6 or 8 people. Some of these photos you've seen a whole group coming together to kind of talk through and review. So that's sort of an exception to the rule. This question of people who don't have the skills and knowledge, that's not really been a concern. If they have the enthusiasm, if they have some interest, even if that interest looks like skepticism, then we can bring them in and we can put them next to somebody working on a hackathon or a project, put them next to somebody who does have the skills. And this is done in a way it's not about a lecture. It's not about let me tell you what I know. It's about let's work together. Come together, work with me on a project. So in a very sort of fun, engaging way, we're accomplishing a result. People without the skills and knowledge, their exposure is positive. And then we reinforce that, of course, with quick labs, with web-based training, with classroom training. So we're not throwing anybody in the deep end, but we're giving them that exposure where they can build the skills and knowledge. And one of my favorite stories is we have a staff member who, at the beginning of this project, he was a temporary employee. He was on a limited time assignment. And he was the kind of person who came into operations, and he would work the night shift. He'd be working overnight monitoring systems. If something went wrong, he'd be calling somebody to get them to address it. And he didn't have a lot of network knowledge, not a lot of operating systems knowledge. A year and a half later, he passed his Solutions Architect Associate certification. He was one of the first people to teach the next book club. He's become a coach and a mentor to other employees. And so I really encourage you, you may be very pleasantly surprised people in your organization that don't yet have the knowledge, but they have the interest. And if you can find a way to connect with that interest and draw it out, they may be some of your best mentors and coaches. And I've learned from him about AWS technology, excuse me. He's got interesting things, and he'll learn, and he'll come into my office and he'll tell me some things that are useful for me to know. So create those opportunities for it to be okay to not be an expert, and you will suddenly have a lot of people proceeding towards being experts.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll say one more thing. He's also grown. So he was a member of the CAT team, and as a member of the CAT team, we had a variety of different what we called spin-offs, right? Different areas that we needed to focus on for readiness for migration, right? There's accounts, there's VPC design. So each of these was a spin-off, and we asked, hey, can you lead one of these spin-off teams? And he's like, well, I've never done that before, but he is one of the best leads of these spin-off teams.
And when he said never done it, he'd never been on a project.
Right.
And then he went from that to leading a project, and he did it. He did it.
Yeah. Great stories.
All right. I think it's almost time for a party of some sort.
I think it is.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.